We're going to finish the social studies graphics lesson that we started last week. So let's kind of breeze through and remind ourselves what we looked at. So we looked at population density maps. I don't know what you'd call these maps, but like where different colors represent different intensities of, whatever data you're looking at. Scatter plots were interesting. You can learn some there. You can see overall trends. If one piece of data lays outside the average in one way or the other. Line graphs, we looked at that, another scatter plot. These were fun, the population pyramids. I think I emailed out the link to all the population pyramids. Anybody look at that? Did either of you look at that website? Have a chance to?
I was supposed to, but I didn't.
No, it's okay. No, it's interesting. I mean, we looked at, this is the United States, pretty standard. A lot of countries around the world look like this, just as age goes up. Pretty much people, the group size of the group in each age bracket as they age pretty much stays the same, and then tapers off as people pass away in old age. But then we had Kenya, and a lot of African countries look like this, and some other countries around the world, and you can make assumptions and also learn some things from that. And then we looked at Qatar, and there's some other countries that look like this, especially those very wealthy Middle Eastern countries that just for, whatever reason, there's a lot of young men, not children, but like, young adult men in that country, and it's really interesting. So then we looked at political cartoons, and this is a donkey for the Democratic Party and an elephant for the Republican Party, and they're working together on disaster aid. And this is the point here is kind of the one thing this is one thing we can agree on, that they argue and don't accomplish so much and don't compromise, but then when it comes to disaster aid after, generally we assumed it was after a big disaster, a hurricane or something. They do work together. They can accomplish things. So let's look at another political cartoon. Okay, this is older. I think I got this out of a GED workbook somewhere. We see a bunch of people. Now, a lot of times in political cartoons, you're going to have things labeled. Sometimes with this one, like that bag is labeled disaster aid. Sometimes certainly the donkey and the elephant represent something. But then here, we see it's 5 men. They have certain attributes. Their hats. This guy has a gun. This guy has money. So we can see things there, but also a lot of times in political cartoons, you're just going to have things straight up labeled. Okay, so we see 5 men: gangster, racketeer, prohibition, bootlegger, dope seller, so like a drug dealer. They're dancing, right? They're on the word depression. So what do we think this generally might be about? Or, when might this have come about?
Probably it means if something happened and all people around have a difficult time, but these men, they're just dancing on others' difficulties.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's the time for them to make money and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. Okay, they're dancing, they're joyful. So it says depression. We can look at their clothing, and maybe, if this was on the GED test, high set test, or in a workbook or something, it might give you a title. It might give you some other information, maybe a date that it ran. And my guess is it was probably during or after the Great Depression of the 1930s. So yeah, while the rest of the world or the country is depressed financially and certainly emotionally, and in hard times, these men and people like them, right? They're representative of others. A racketeer is a person who makes money off of I think off of bets. A gangster is a person in crime. A bootlegger. What was a bootlegger?
I have no idea.
Totolope, do you know what a bootlegger is?
Um, Someone who tries to sell or sells copies of merchandise that they do not own the copyrights of.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So today, like if you go to a big city, you go into some part of New York, and there's people selling like we say bootleg copies of DVDs, right? Or music or something. Okay. Unofficial, illegally, probably illegally made copies of something, or maybe like fake purses. For some reason, purses, handbags are like the most copied thing. Like 40, I've seen, just recently I saw some video, like 40% of all fancy handbags, women's purses, handbags out there, 40% are fake. Um, so yeah, we call those bootleg copies. Okay, that goes back to the 30s. Remember, a long time ago, we talked about the prohibition, whatever. I think the 18th Amendment, the constitutional amendment. Through the 1920s, 30s, you have prohibition, right? The prohibition of alcohol. It's not allowed. The sale, the manufacturing, sale, and consumption of alcohol is illegal. The tallest guy here, which might represent he's the biggest problem or the biggest person benefiting, is prohibition. He's holding hands with a bootlegger. A bootlegger, I think it goes back to the idea that like you'd have a flask of alcohol, like a flask bottle, and that would be down the leg of your boot, like if you had high boots. You'd keep that down your boot. So a bootlegger today, we say like that person selling illegal DVDs or something. Back then, I think the original meaning is a person who's making illegal alcohol. Okay. Which you would then keep like in a flask down your boot. So that's a bootlegger. Dope seller here is a guy selling drugs. Um, and so yeah, we look at political cartoons. You look at all the labels if things are labeled, and you look at the overall thing. They're dancing on the Depression. We figure the Great Depression. They're dancing because these people and people like them, they're representative of something. People like them are making money and are very happy and dancing, right? So you got to look at you got to use your head a little bit with political cartoons and think, what does this represent? And certainly political cartoons are very timely, generally. Like if you look at a political cartoon today in today's newspaper, it's not going to mean much a year from now or 10 years from now. Or a political cartoon, if you don't have the date that it's representative of, it doesn't mean as much. Like even this one with the two political parties. You could rerun this in the newspaper the day or the week after any big disaster, big hurricane or flood or something. But it's more potent if it's stronger if it means something on a particular day. Most political cartoons are tied to a time. They're in context of what's going on in the news and politics or whatever. Like this, if we didn't have the word depression and understand that this was happening in the Great Depression, this wouldn't mean a whole lot. We wouldn't. It would mean less to us. We wouldn't know what's going on. So political cartoons, you really got to think. You really got to think. Okay, well, what do I know about this time period, this event, whatever it might be mentioned? Okay, political cartoons are they can be tricky, but if you pay attention, read everything, certainly read the title. If there's any dates, you can make sense of it. Any questions on political cartoons?
No, thank you.
Okay. Let's look at a pie chart or a pie graph. here's military deaths of World War II. We see, and it's in numbers. It's not percent, although, a pie graph by its very nature represents some percentage. But the numbers here don't give us a percentage. They give us straight numbers of deaths. So more than half of all deaths in military deaths in World War II came from what country?
Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union. Okay.
Union.
Yeah. More than half of the men that died in military. Now there's a lot of civilian deaths as well in World War II. But this is military deaths. More than half of the people that died were Soviet Union soldiers. So number 4, let's get a little bit more specific. Or number 24. What 4 countries saw the most military deaths in World War II? Soviet Union's number 1. What other 3 make up the top 4?
Yeah, I'm driving. It's hard for me to see this.
Okay. Yeah, no problem, Nadia. Totally look at what do you?
Germany.
Yeah, Germany.
Germany. The gray says others. That's next to Germany. And then
Germany,
Japan.
Japan, China,
Yeah. Okay.
the Soviet Union. This.
Right. So we can say, and actually, if you look at the color code, the key, they're actually in order, which is nice. That's not, you can't assume that, but once you look at it and you kind of go back and forth, you can say, oh, they're in order. Yeah, totally. Look, you say the gray is others. A lot of people would be tempted to look at that gray and say, oh, that's one of the top 4, right? That's the 3rd biggest slice of the pie. But you got to read the question. It says, what 4 countries saw the most military deaths? Well, others is just a group,
Actually, I have a question about China.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about their history in World War II. What did they do? Did they fight for the Union or for Japan? Which side they took?
They were, I think, if I remember correctly, China was sucked into World War II because the Japanese decided now would be a good time to invade China. I'm pretty sure it was anything that China was involved in World War II was because of Japan. Of course, Japan is just, the islands off the coast of China. So I'm pretty sure Japan was all active and very aggressive. And you have what they call the Pacific theater of fighting in World War II and everything that happened over there. I think, and I don't know much, but I think the main way that China was involved was because Japan was getting in their face and even trying to invade China. So yeah, you don't think of, when you think of World War II, you don't think of China, but I believe there was a good bit of fighting, mainly between China and Japan. Yeah. So yeah, you gotta, like I was saying, you gotta read the question. It says what 4 countries? Well, others isn't a specific country, so you'd be wrong if you listed that. So you skip that one and you see red, black, white, and yellow, and that's like you said, the Soviet Union, Germany, Japan, and China. So you can't, you got to read questions closely. That's always a lesson to be learned. It says number 25, what can be said about the Soviet military deaths compared to the rest of the world? That's kind of an easy one. Which we already kind of said, how could you summarize Soviet deaths compared to the rest of the world?
As far as I know, there are 2 reasons why so many soldiers died. First, we really had big amount of soldiers and people who fought in World War II, and we had really bad fighting there.
Mm-hmm.
But another reason that the soldiers and the army did not have enough of, I don't know English word for that, like guns and everything.
Supplies.
And supplies, they did not have enough of supplies. And they were sent to the battles against Germany, and they were not prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's too sad.
Yeah, yeah. I've maybe when I send out my email this afternoon, there's a video I'll include called "The Fallen." I think I've mentioned it before, and it visualizes through a lot of bar graphs and things. Were very well done. The millions and millions and millions of Soviet deaths, and this is just military deaths. There are 13 million Soviet soldiers died, military deaths. But then you have also millions and millions and millions of civilians in the Soviet Union. So yeah, you can't lose, 13 million deaths in your army unless you have a very large army. So yeah, Nadia, you're right. The reason they could have so many deaths is because they had so many soldiers. I don't know the death rates. This doesn't tell us, the death rates, what percentage of German soldiers died, what percentage of Soviet Union soldiers died, or American. But certainly the size of the army is going to matter. You can't lose 13 million soldiers if you only have a 5 million soldier army. But what I was thinking for number 25, really just generally, given the information in front of us, you could generally say more Soviet Union soldiers died than all others combined. Right? That's what I was thinking there, which we already kind of said. Okay, so pie charts, got to look at the information in front of you, make sure you're not mistaken. This gives us the raw numbers of deaths. It doesn't give us percentages of this pie. And if there was a question about how many soldiers died in World War II, you'd have to add up all those numbers, right? Okay. Now I made this a couple of years ago, so this information isn't the most new, but it's still accurate. So this goes back to the last election, 4 years ago, 2016, and Pennsylvania in 2012, the election before presidential election before that. Well, let's look on the left. You have two maps on the left-hand side. Did the electoral votes in Pennsylvania in 2012 go to the Democratic nominee or the Republican nominee? In 2012, did the electoral votes in the Electoral College for Pennsylvania, go to the Republican or the Democrat?
I lost the question.
In
Did you ask about 2012 or 2016?
2012. Remember, the Electoral
It
College.
was more the Democrat.
Right, yeah, okay.
Oh,
so
no.
No, you're right.
Like it was more people from Republican who was for a Republican party, but Democrat won. How does this happen?
Well, so let's backtrack. So I kind of asked you a question, without explaining the topic. So the Electoral College, keep in mind, every state has, in the Electoral College, that's how the president gets chosen, right? We don't go by majority of the country, because in 2016, the popular, what you call the popular vote, the total of the whole country, Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump, but that's not how the president is selected. The president is selected through the Electoral College. So every state has the number of electors, not you and me, but the electors in the Electoral College, equal to their number of representatives in Congress. Whatever your state is, 2 senators plus your House of Representatives representative. I think Pennsylvania has 21, 22, 23, something like that. Pennsylvania is actually a fairly big, important state. States like Iowa, South Dakota, they have like 3, 4, 5. California has 55 because there's so many people there. So it varies state to state, and you win by gaining the majority of those votes. So if you get, and it goes state by state, majority within each state. That's what matters in the Electoral College. So like if Hillary Clinton won the state of California, as Democrats almost always do, because there's a lot of Democrats in California. So she counted on and got those 55 Electoral College votes. Okay, some states are very predictable. Okay, California, there's lots of Republicans in California, but there's far more Democrats than Republicans in California. So if you're a Democrat running for president, you're going to assume that you will get those Electoral College votes. What's a Republican, solid Republican state? Let's say, I don't even know. Texas. I think Texas generally goes Republican. So there's plenty of Democrats in Texas, but there's more, and there tends to always be more Republicans in Texas. So if you're the Republican running for president, you're going to assume that you will get those all the Texas Electoral College votes, because you will win the majority of Texas. Pennsylvania in 2012, 2016, and very much 2020 is what they call a swing state, which means there's such a light balance between Democrats and Republicans that you can't really predict today who's going to win. It's very, very close. Okay, call it a swing state. Doesn't mean anything bad's happening. It just means it's super close between the number of Republican people and the number of Democratic people in the state of Pennsylvania. So, my question was, in 2012, who got Pennsylvania's Electoral College votes? It's the Democrat. 2012 was the re-election of Barack Obama. So he got the Pennsylvania votes because you look at the top, 52% to 47%. Blue is Democrat. He won the majority of votes in Pennsylvania. In 2016, look at the right-hand side, look at the top. The Republican, this time Donald Trump, won the majority of votes in the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, the map doesn't matter. It's just the bars at the top. Now, but the map does kind of matter. Okay. Now what you care about in the Electoral College, state by state, is winning the majority of votes in that state. So how are you going to win the majority of votes in Pennsylvania? Generally speaking, big cities and higher population density, but bigger cities tend to be more Democrat than Republican in big cities. Okay, it's just kind of a way things are. So you can see on this map, you can see exactly where Pittsburgh is in Allegheny County. This is, of course, the counties of Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh in Allegheny County. Erie is a bigger city. And then all this over here around Philadelphia. And, there's some really big towns out there near Philadelphia. So that's where you can see exactly where the big cities are. Okay. So what do we see if the Democrat won in 2012 and the Republican won in 2016, how now let me give you a clue. Look at the colored bars at the bottom, 40%. This is now, the colors are county by county. Okay, so if a Democrat won 40% of a county, it's a very light blue. So, or rather, if they won by if they beat the other person by 40%, it's light blue. If they won by 40%, it's light red. If the Republican won, so the darker the color, it means the bigger victory they had in that county. Okay, so compare the two maps, 2012 to 2016. How does the Republican win in 2016? What worked to his advantage?
Like, more people decided to give their voices for the Republicans.
Okay. Yeah, certainly more Republican votes were cast. Where were those Republican votes cast?
In the middle of the state.
Yeah. If you look at
Like,
the counties that were blue, that were won by the Democrat, it's almost the same, really, between the two. You still have Allegheny County, you have Pittsburgh, you have Erie up north. Actually, Centre County, where State College is, where Penn State University is, it's kind of a bigger city. It's a college town. College towns tend to be, vote more Democratic. So there's actually a little bit more blue there in 2016 than 2012. But yeah, the Republican votes were cast by the middle of the state because Nadia is right. In the middle of the state, look at all the dark red, right? The counties, let's say that all the counties, let's say there's no change between red and blue. There's a little bit of change, but let's say there's no change between red and blue. But what changes is the darkness of the red, right? So pick a county out here up north. It's medium red in 2012, but in 2016 it's dark red, which means more votes were cast. So your county didn't change, but if all those votes are going into one big pot for the state of Pennsylvania, then that matters, right? So very few of these counties changed from red to blue or blue to red, but what changed was it appears that a lot more Republicans voted in some of these states that turned from medium red to dark red. Does that make sense?
yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, right, on this piece of information. But you look at the shades, and then you look at the map and you look at the total. Okay, so number 28, which was a closer election? Which was the outcome closer?
2016.
2016, right? Barack Obama, the Democrat in 2012, won the state of Pennsylvania 52% to 47%. In 2016, Donald Trump wins by 49% to 48%. That's close. That's a nail biter. I think in 2012 or 2020, this year they're predicting Pennsylvania is very much going to be a toss-up. It could go either way, and we'll see on election day. It's going to be very, very close again. So that's the color shaded maps, and certainly there's a lot going on here. Okay, but the color shades, then we have two things to compare back and forth, so there's a lot of information there. Okay, And I just tossed this up here, color shaded map. Here's another population density. We've looked at this before. Actually, the original one we looked at up above was, let's get there. This is by country, right? So it's only going to give us so much information. Here's, the United States is kind of a medium orange, but also this is Alaska up north. Alaska doesn't have very many people in it, but it's the same shade as the rest of the country. So it's a little bit misleading. You'd think, oh, there's a lot of people in Alaska, but there's not a lot of people in Alaska. It's just the same shade because it's the same country as the United States. So this, depending on how it's broken up, this shaded map can only give you so much information. This is very detailed. The state of Pennsylvania, this is population density, and you can see exactly where the cities are. Okay, Erie, Pittsburgh. Here's all crazy different things in Philadelphia. This is Center County. This is State College where Penn State is. You have Wilkes-Barre and Scranton up here. You can see exactly where the cities are because that's what population density is. So, and you can see where the cities are not, right? The green, the darker the green, the fewer the people. Yeah, you could learn a lot. You could use, depending on what you needed a map for, this would be a pretty useful map. Okay. So color shaded maps. Here's just a regular map. Okay, take a look at this. Now, number 29, the triangle trade. Well, let's take a look here. So we have North America, Africa, Europe. These lines are arrows, okay, arrows, that's important to notice that they're arrows, and these have different things written on them: rice, silk, indigo, tobacco, guns, cloth, iron, beer, slaves, gold, ivory, spices, hardwoods. So these are things, right? They appear to be things, manufactured goods, luxuries, things you sell, right? So we can make some assumptions there. Question number 29, the triangle trade is a system of trade that brought African slaves to North America in the 1600s to 1800s, as well as other trade. What did Africa get in return for slaves? So slaves are coming out. We look at the arrows. Pink is out of Africa. They're exporting slaves to the Caribbean, and gold, ivory, spices, hardwoods are going up north to Europe, to England. So the question is, what is Africa getting in return?
Guns, clothes, iron, beer.
Yeah. Okay. And one other.
And yeah, at the same tools, rum, iron, gunpowder.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So this is called, historians call this the triangle trade because it's three things: North America, Europe, and Africa, and it's kind of a triangle. Some things are going back and forth between North America and Europe. Some things are going back and forth between Europe and Africa, and some things are going back and forth between Africa and North America. Number 30, what goods traveled east across the Atlantic Ocean?
Rum, iron, gunpowder, cloth, and tools.
Yeah. Okay, that's traveling east from the west to the east. So that's traveling east. That's to Africa. And then the orange is traveling from North America east to Europe. North America is exporting whale oil, lumber, furs, rice, silk, indigo, tobacco, sugar, molasses, wood. That's coming from the Caribbean islands. Okay, what did America import? What would be an import?
Rice, tobacco, wood, sugar, whale oil, how can you pronounce that?
Well, that's
Lumber.
those would really be
Oh no, that's what
Yeah,
America's sector. Yeah,
yeah.
manufactured goods and luxuries from Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and slaves from Africa,
Yeah. So the triangle
and that's it.
trade, yeah, generally
And, yeah,
speaking. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, I said that's it.
Yeah, yeah. The triangle trade, generally speaking, like each of these three things, North America, Europe, and Africa, were exporting, were doing a certain thing. The labor in the form of slaves comes from Africa. The raw materials come from North America. Whale oil, lumber, furs, silk, rice, tobacco, sugar. Okay. The raw materials come from North America and then go to Europe. Europe takes those raw materials and makes manufactured goods, luxuries, guns, cloth. Okay. So uh, we take the African labor, the enslaved African slaves, and grow, say, cotton in North America, and then cotton goes to Europe where they take that North American cotton and turn it into things. So that's the triangle trade. Some of those manufactured goods made it back to Africa, um, and then the cycle just kind of kept going. Okay, so on a map, if there's arrows, you got to pay attention to the arrows. If there's directions, any question about directions, you got to pay attention to that. Okay, maps are pretty straightforward. Here's a bar graph. Okay, title is U.S. exports to Great Britain, France, and Germany, 1913 to 1921. Do we know what might be happening? What those dates are? What's happening between Great Britain, France, and Germany in 1913 to 1921?
Um, World War One.
Yeah, World War One. Okay, so they don't tell us that, but that's good to know, right? It's important to know. So number 32, what happened to U.S. exports to Great Britain between 1913 and 1919? How would we summarize that? U.S. exports to Great Britain on this map or on this graph.
I would say they increased.
Yeah, they go up. The question is from 1913 to 1919, so that's kind of just up, 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 up. They go down after that, but that's not what the question is. So yeah, they increased. What was the value of U.S. exports to France at its peak? Okay, generally with a graph like this, you got to be ready to answer one or two questions about specific numbers. So the value of U.S. exports to France at its peak, who can estimate that?
To me, it looks like about $100 million.
Yeah, well, this is kind of weird. It's a thousand,
Yeah.
and 1,000,000,000 is really a billion, so it's kind of odd that they have that there. Yeah, a billion, 1,000,000,000 on the way they phrase it. Yeah, about 1,000 over there. Okay, so at its peak, America was exporting about $1 billion of exports to France. Okay, that kind of pick a year here, but 1916, 17, 18, 19, all pretty close. 34, World War I was fought from 1914 to 1918. Which one of these three nations was the U.S. at war with? How could you tell from this graph?
Um, Definitely Germany.
And why would you say that?
Well, I know they were fighting Germany, but you can also tell that definitely between 1915 and 1918, there's literally no exports going to Germany at all.
Yeah.
Probably because countries who fought against Germany did not want to buy anything from them.
Right. Right. I mean, it's conceivable.
Or
Maybe.
I don't
Maybe a
know,
little.
probably they did not want to sell anything, or other countries like US and France and Great Britain did not want to buy their products.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this is just exports to those countries, but yeah, I bet if we were looking at a graph of imports from those countries, I can't imagine we're buying many German goods during during a war. So yeah, that tells you something. If you didn't if these countries weren't labeled, if they were labeled country A, country B, country C, and you looked at this, you'd be able to tell country C, if it's that dark gray, country C is at war with the United States. You could make that assumption, right? So something like this, bar graphs are going to be, give you enough information to make some assumptions like that. Now, number 35 is good because we gotta sort of take our thinking a step further. The British set up a naval blockade to stop goods from reaching Germany. Was it effective? And how would we be able to tell that from this?
Yeah, probably it was effective because no one could buy anything from Germany.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, there's always something. Okay, you got to think. Well, what do I not know? What can I not learn from this? So we don't know. Perhaps America would have sold exports to Germany, but the British set up a naval blockade, and so we couldn't. You know, we don't know if America chose to not import or export things to Germany, or if we would have wanted to, but the British naval blockade stopped it. So we can't make that judgment. All we know is there was virtually zero exports to Germany. So in this question, can we assume that it was effective? Yeah, we could probably say that. If the question was Germany set up a naval blockade of British goods to keep Britain from getting anything, we would say no, that wasn't very effective because look at those high bars of how much we were selling to Britain, right? So you always got to think of, okay, can I know, if somebody's asking a question based on that information, you can say, can I know that? Is that something I'm really able to see here? Okay. Okay, line graph, same sort of thing. This is age distribution of public school teachers. Okay, kind of tricky here. Age distribution of public school teachers. Now, this is 3 graphs in one. This is tricky to look at. Okay, so across the bottom we have age 20 to 70. Up the vertical axes, we have number of teachers, 20,000 teachers, 40,000 teachers, 60, 80, 100,000. Okay. The 3 different lines represent 3 different school years. So this is kind of a weird graph to look at. I don't know, kind of hard to see. The dark blue line is 1993 to 94. The light blue line is 99 to 2000, and the dark red line is 2003 to 2004. 3 different school years. If you took, let's say all the schools in the country and said, how old are all your teachers? This is what it would be like. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. It's kind of confusing when you look at it at first, at least for me. Okay, number 36. What 2 things happened to the population of public school teachers from 93 to 2003? How would we describe what trends do we see?
It was a little, it dropped a little from 90. Um, like we lose some teachers and then we got them again.
Mm-hmm.
Amount of teachers changed.
Well, this isn't okay. This isn't really like showing left to right. This isn't showing change over time. The change over time is comparing the two lines. Okay, so let's just look at the red. Let's focus on the red line. This represents how many people, like if you asked every school in the country, how many 30-year-old teachers do you have? Well, in 2003, the red line, let's say 90,000. I'm looking right here. 90,000 30-year-olds. Okay. The peak. What age has the most teachers in 2003? What would you say?
About 55 years old.
Yeah, somewhere in there. 50. Yeah, that 50. What is that? 52, 55. Yeah, the peak. Okay. So if you said 2003, just focus on the red line. Every teacher in the country, what? How old are you? The highest number would be 50, yeah, mid 50s, early 50s, whatever that number is, 53. Okay. So, what two things happened to the overall population from 93 to 2003? Now, it's the dark blue line and the red line. I do kind of see two things, two significant differences. First, what happens to the peak? There's a shift in the highest number. Kind of this, this mountain. You look at the blue mountain and the red mountain. What way does it shift from the blue to the red?
2003 to 2004, the peak age is higher than 93 and 94.
Yeah, okay. So that biggest number of people is a few years older in 2003 than the biggest number of people per year in 93. So you could say the average teacher, well, you can't say I don't want to make too big of an assumption. What we could say is there are more older teachers than there were in 10 years before that in 93. Like, look at the difference. Look at the blue line, the slope down the mountain. Past that, there's still, the red line's still going up. So you could say there's more people in their 50s, and even into their 60s, more teachers in their 50s in 2003 than 1993. So that's one thing. There's more older teachers. Also, but look at this group from the 20 to 35. Blue, it zooms up, obviously, because that's when people are graduating college. There's not going to be very many 21-year-old teachers because, you generally graduate college at 22. So 22, it zooms up, 23, 5, late 20s, okay, 30, and it slowly climbs from there. But in 2003, the line shoots up and then stays higher in the red than it was in the blue. So there's more older teachers, but there's also just more younger teachers, right? And any given, if you look, pick an age, draw a line straight up. The red line is much higher than the blue line. There's more 25-year-olds, 26-year-olds, 27-year-olds, 30-year-olds. There's more of them, right? So number 37, how many 30-year-old teachers were there in 93 and in 2003? Let's say 30-year-olds, just kind of estimating here. 93, maybe right here. Draw a line to the left. That's maybe what, 50,000? Now, we don't know, this doesn't tell us if it's national. I assume it's national. If we go up 30 years, wait till we hit the red, now you're talking 80, somewhere in here, 80 to 90,000, somewhere around there. So almost, almost double. Okay. Number 38, what has happened to the population of teachers in their late 60s? Let me put that a different way. What year are people
So
working the latest in life?
about 60. Some people can be retired in their 60s, so probably teachers does this.
Yeah. So people, yeah, certainly, draw a line from 60 and it goes down real fast. There are not many,
Yeah.
there's some, but there's not many 70-year-old teachers out there. But if that peak, look at the peaks, right? It peaks at age before 50 even in 93. And then what? I guess people start to retire. And then, but in 2003, the red, it peaks, like we said, age 53 or something. And then people start to retire from there. So maybe something happens where people are working longer. Maybe something happens with the retirement age and people have to work longer. They keep working, they're not retired. So that would be reflected on this graph. Okay. Almost out of time. So I think there's just one more couple of ideas here. So mean, median, and mode. This is averages. When you talk about average, what's the average? Okay, so let's look at this. So books read by Maria. This is by month, and the number of books she reads each month. Okay, pretty straightforward. Are you guys familiar with the averages called mean, median, and mode?
Oh yeah.
I'm not.
Okay. So Nadia, when you say like the average, what's the average number of books she read? When generally when somebody says what's the
They
average,
were counted and then divided for
yeah,
something like.
that's called the mean average number. Okay. Don't know why, but when you add them all up and divide by the number of 6 months, right? She reads 18 books in 6 months. That's an average of 3 books per month. That's called the mean average. Just regular average, right? We think of that as just what's the average? What's the average number of books she reads each month? That's technically called the mean number. Okay. And there's different ways. Then there's the median. What is the median number of books that Maria read? It says the median is the middle number when the numbers are listed in order. Now, this is kind of a weird thing. It's useful maybe when you're talking about certain sort of statistics. But you line up the numbers, right? December she reads 1, February she reads 2. There's 3 months where she reads 3, and then January she reads 6. So you line them up. What is the middle number? Now, if it's an odd number, then it's easy to figure out. It's the middle number when you line them up. Here there's 2, so we're gonna add them and take the average of those two middle numbers, and the average, well, they're both 3, so the average is 3. So the median number is 3. Month by month, you line up the numbers. Okay, that's called the median. Then you have the mode. Same thing, you line up the numbers again per month. You're not taking the average, you're not taking the mean average. You line them up. The mode is the number that occurs most often. Here it's also still 3. So 3 months she reads 3 books. So that's the number that occurs most often. So that could be useful. I'm trying to think of an example when you'd want to know that. Yeah, well, can't think of anything off my head. top of my head, but if you said what's the number of books that she most often reads, it happens to be 3 here, which is the same as the mean average, but sometimes it doesn't have to be that same number. But you can use these for different reasons, and certainly, that could be something you're asked about down the road. And this last slide I have is just an infographic. Sometimes you see them in magazines or online, or somebody tweets out an infographic. This is about the Ohio River. So it's a map, right? There's a ton of information here. It's a map of the Ohio River. This squiggly line is the Ohio River. But there's also all kinds of different bits of information on it, right? River facts, pollution, total chemicals released, this line graph here, bar graph. So infographics can be fun. They can be very, people make them, design them to be very attractive and cool looking and lots of information. That's not something you're going to see generally in the GED test, but what they call infographics are, well, let's do a quick Google search here. Let's see. I just look up infographic and then look at images. There's all kinds of different things. Here's a thing on space shuttles. Here's an infographic about infographics. So, no, I don't want this. So that's all kinds of information about infographics. They're cool. It's a way to put a lot of information in one place. Okay. All right. So any questions about all these graphics we discussed?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, let me remind you, next week will be our last week before we take a pause for the summer. We'll have a good discussion next week, and then we'll stop for July and pick up somewhere in the beginning of the school year. Okay. So I'll send out an email. But yeah, thank you for logging in. I appreciate your time and your loyalty, you too. I hope it's a good part of your learning. And if you have any questions or ideas of what we can look at or what you'd like to learn more about, just let me know. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
all right. Well, great. Well, have a good day. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a great week. Bye.
Thanks. See you guys.
Bye-bye.